longer the fair-haired boy. He was just another German general who the Allies had defeated, and thus had let the Führer down in Hitler's own mind. And from there, it went downhill. Rommel, and we don't know exactly when he found this out, but sometime around 1943, he learned from somebody, and we don't know who yet, about the mass murders of Jews and Russians in the East. And Rommel immediately internally turned against the Nazis and Hitler because he did not countenance murder. He believed in a form of chivalry. You took care of the enemy wounded, you treated prisoners well. Hitler ordered him to murder some Jews. He captured a Jewish battalion in North Africa. And Hitler sent an order that he was to kill them. And Rommel burned the order and turned the Jewish prisoners over to the Italians. So that's kind of when there was a sea change. And also, Rommel suggested to Hitler that they negotiate with the Allies, and because he could see the writing on the wall, and Hitler refused to do that. He said, they won't negotiate with me. And, of course, Rommel thought at that point he should step down, but that was something Hitler wouldn't even consider, of course. So it was a gradual change. But eventually Rommel joined the plot to overthrow Hitler. He differed from some of the anti-Hitler conspirators. He wanted to put Hitler on trial and show the German people what kind of leader they really had. And he felt they would turn on Hitler. The public sentiment would act against him. But others, I think, had a more realistic view that capturing Hitler was something they could not accomplish, that he needed to be killed. And of course, that's what they tried to do.
And getting to, I think, what Rommel is known well for at the end of the war with the defense of the Norman coast prior to D-Day. And I think most people think of this when, if they're fans of old Hollywood war movies, with The Longest Day, it opens with Rommel talking about using the exact line of The Longest Day. Did he foresee that the Allies would probably invade there, since this was the big question amongst the Axis powers? Where are the Allies going to try to invade in force along the French coastline? Do you think he accurately foresaw what would happen, and do you think he would have been able to defend against it if he had been properly supported?
If Rommel had been given a free hand, I think it's quite likely, I'm not sure of this, of course, but I think it's quite likely the D-Day invasion would have been repulsed. Certainly, Omaha Beach would have been wiped out. It was almost wiped out as it was. But he requested another thing. In the book, I give a laundry list of units that he wanted to move to Normandy. Rommel could read a map, and he had plotted the Allied bombings on a map of Europe. And he also plotted the coastal minings that the offshore minings the U.S. and Royal Navies did. And Rommel concluded that the Allies were trying to make Normandy a strategic island. In other words, blowing bridges and railroads so that Normandy could not be quickly reinforced. And this led him to conclude that they were probably coming in Normandy. And he even requested they bring up the entire 3rd Flak Corps to be used as anti-tank weapons against the invasion. And increasing it by a couple of panzer divisions and an entire Flak Corps, along with several infantry divisions, it's questionable if the D-Day invasion would have been a success. He also checked the mining. he could tell there were a lot of mines that the Navy's laid off the coast of Calais. And it wouldn't make sense to have an invasion where your landing craft and your naval vessels had to wade through mines to get to the beach. But in the Normandy Bight there, off the coast of Normandy, there weren't any mining. There was no mining going on, which hinted to him that, hey, they're going to come here. And strangely enough, Hitler at one point picked Normandy as the invasion site. But at one point, Hitler picked practically every place
right
along the Western Front. So I guess that's not too significant. But once the first Allied soldier put his foot on Normandy, he immediately decided that wasn't the invasion, because he believed the Allies would make a fake landing first and then come ashore with the main landings. And Normandy is excellent infantry country, but very poor tank country. But Hitler sent the panzer divisions to Normandy to hold the front, while the infantry divisions, sat around idle around the Calais area. So when the Allies finally broke out of Normandy, the panzer divisions basically had been destroyed. And then he brought up the infantry divisions, which were quickly swamped by people like Patton in the interior of France. So he fought it exactly the opposite of the way he should.
So you see, if Rommel had been given the keys to the German military and could use whatever resources he wanted before the invasion of Normandy, what would he do differently, do you think? So you mentioned installing more anti-aircraft artillery, generally beefing up the defenses, but can you think of any specific things you think he would have done if he would have had total access to the German military?
Well, he did some very successful things anyway. He was named commander in late December 1943 of the 7th and 15th Armies. And he significantly strengthened the coastal defense. He laid more than twice as many mines in those two sectors as the German military. He did this in 6 months, as the German military had laid in 4 years. He wanted to strengthen the coastal defense, and he did. I mean, take a look at Omaha Beach. He made an inspection there on May the 11th, like 3 weeks before the invasion. Didn't like what he saw. It was being defended by the 77th Infantry Division, which was mostly what they call Volksdeutsch, ethnic Germans, mostly from Poland, and many of them didn't even speak German. The American planners correctly assumed that this division would not fight well, and that's the only reason they landed on Omaha Beach in the first place. But Rommel decided this was a terrible unit to defend here. The Allies were likely to come here. So he brought up the 243rd Infantry Division, which consisted of young men. They were Germans. They were true believers in the Führer and the cause, and they had all spent 2 years in the Eastern Front. Omaha Beach initially was defended by a Volksdeutsch battalion from the 77th. On D-Day, it was defended by an entire German regiment of Eastern Front veterans. That's quite an improvement. The Allies, of course, had the French resistance, and they informed them that the defenders of Omaha Beach had been changed. And they did it by the usual method, carrier pigeons. Well, Rommel knew that the French were tipping off the Allies this way, so he aligned the beach with people who had no other duties at that particular time, men who were carrying shotguns, and their sole job was to shoot pigeons. And the French assumed that one pigeon might be shot, but he could send a second pigeon with the same message the next day or the day after. One of them would get through, if not both. Well, this time, the Germans lucked out. They shot down both pigeons. And, of course, the French resistance didn't know where the invasion was going to come. They didn't know both pigeons had been shot. The upshot of it is the Americans didn't know until D-Day was in progress that an entirely different breed of cat was defending Omaha Beach. And it almost got the landing there wiped out.
You mentioned at the top of this podcast episode the downfall of Rommel in the attempt to kill Hitler. Could you touch on this attempt, Rommel's downfall, and then getting back into counterfactuals? Can you see ways where the plot to kill Hitler that Rommel was a part of could have succeeded?
Well, history often turns on a dime. The man who was leading the plot, his name was Colonel von Stauffenberg, Klaus von Stauffenberg. Matter of fact, I wrote a book later with his cousin, Theodor Friedrich von Stauffenberg. Long German military family. He had fought with Rommel in Tunisia, where he'd lost an arm and an eye, and Stauffenberg wanted to put a bomb under Hitler's table, which he did. But it was initially supposed to be set off on July 17th, and they were going to have a briefing in a stone bunker. And had Stauffenberg set the bomb off on the 17th in that concrete bunker, it would have killed everybody in it, no doubt about it. But Himmler was not present on the 17th, and neither was Goering. So Stauffenberg did not detonate the bomb. 3 days later, they had another briefing, July 20th, but they moved it to a wooden building because it was so hot. And Himmler and Goering were not present that day either, but the resistance decided it couldn't wait any longer, so Stauffenberg was told to detonate the bomb, even if they weren't there, which he did. And the blast was mitigated by a table, and Hitler was wounded but not killed. Had Stauffenberg detonated on the 17th, I don't see any way Hitler or anybody else in that building would have survived. And also, Stauffenberg's aide had a bomb too, and he was going to set it for a double detonation, but because the sergeant came in and interrupted them when they were getting ready, he never did break the capsule that would have caused a detonation. And the second bomb was not used. Had both bombs gone off, it's quite likely Hitler would have been killed. So Hitler was, well, let's face it, Adolf Hitler was lucky. And as Stauffenberg said, he also had the instincts of a rat. And he was fortunate to survive it.
Hey everyone, Scott here. One more brief word from our sponsors.
Well, another question that I've seen floating around about Rommel is if he hadn't suffered this tragic fate, do you think that he would have been punished anyway at the Nuremberg trials since he was a field marshal? With others too, he might have been blamed, or do you think that it would have come out that he wasn't involved in the Holocaust the way that other members of the Nazi Party were? What do you think would have happened with him had he survived?
I don't think they would have gone after Rommel because the British admired him so much. Plus, Rommel was not linked to the Holocaust. He the Holocaust basically took place in the East. This is where most of the Jews were murdered. This is where the mass murders